Howdy, howdy. Today is the Selesnya version of the Color Challenge. This is the Alter the Brood podcast. My name is Paul, also known as MTG Anonymous on YouTube, Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and other places. So for today, this is the 3DH version of Shalai. Again, the Color Challenge is where we try to make a 3DH deck in every single color combination of Magic. Selesnya is green and white, in case you didn't know. This deck is $2.32 online or $163.82 in paper. You can also get that cheaper if you don't use brand new cards, but I actually didn't look at that for this video, or for this recording, excuse me. But $2.32 is how much this is, so that gives us some room for fluctuations. I previously had a Reese the Redeemed deck made 2 weeks ago, but 3 of the cards that were in it went over $1, so I'm not able to use that. So we're going to do Shalai because she's only 12 cents instead of 40 cents, but Reese the Redeemed is in this deck, if I remember correctly. Maybe? Let me double check. I'm pretty sure he is. Yep, he's definitely in the deck at an R1 drop slot. So, but anyways, you can find us at MTG Anonymous on YouTube. So MTG ANONYMOUS. We're also on Discord at the same name, and there's a server at MTG Anonymous. There's also a Patreon at MTG Anonymous. You can go to that if you want. It really doesn't matter to me per se, but I'll just be able to push out more content if I do get a couple people on there, but again, not super important. Also, you can find me at mtganonymous1@gmail.com. That's how you get a hold of me in case you want me to do certain deck techs, stuff like that. And then also, if you want to see any of my lists, they're at MTG Anonymous on MTG Goldfish, and then I'm going to start putting them other places too. I have a couple of articles, but they're not ready yet, so whatever. Anyway, let's play the music, and then we'll get into the deck tech. Now that that's done, that's usually ending music, but I thought maybe that would fit just a little bit better here instead of there. But anyway, let's get into the deck tech. So first off, we have Shalai, Voice of Plenty. She is a 3/4 legendary creature angel for 3 and a white. She has flying. You planeswalkers you control and other creatures you control have hexproof, and then for 4 green and a green, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So the way I have this deck set out is we actually care about those +1/+1 counters. We want to make our creatures as big as possible and then be able to swing. But then also we have enchantments like Sandworm Convergence, where flying creatures can't attack us. So that makes it so our opponents will have to attack our other opponents with the flying creatures, and then we can also attack with our flying creatures at other people. And then the Sandworm Convergence also makes worms, so that also helps us when people try to swing at us at the ground. So yeah, that's basically what we want to do in this deck. And then Shalai combos with a few cards in this deck, but I'll go over those as we go. First card on the list is Mikaeus the Lunarch. For X and white, legendary creature, human cleric. It enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it, so basically the more mana you spend on this card, the more +1/+1 counters it has, and then you can tap, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or you can tap and remove one from it, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So the way that works, Shalai, we use her, put a +1/+1 counter on all of our creatures. It gives Mikaeus a +1/+1 counter. Then we remove one from Mikaeus, and then we put one on each of the other creatures. So every turn we can put 2 on each other creature, and then Mikaeus, unfortunately, doesn't go up in power. So originally you'll want to do 3 or 4 into Mikaeus just so he doesn't die while you're trying to get everything else situated, but it's really good. It's basically 6 mana combo, so put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. So yeah, that's how that works. Reese the Redeemed is next for Selesnya Hybrid, so either green or white. You get a legendary creature, Elf Warrior. It's a 1/1. For 2 in Selesnya Hybrid, you tap, put a 1/1 green and white Elf Warrior creature token into play. Or for 4 in Selesnya 2 times, tap for each creature token you control, put a token into play that's a copy of that creature. So basically how we'll be doing this is we'll keep making copies not copies, we'll keep making Elf Warrior creature tokens, keep making those over and over again as we go, as we have more mana, because we should have quite a bit of it. And then as we continue, once we get to a point where we have more than 3, because it costs 3 per one, and then 6 per making copies of each one. After we've made the first 2 tokens, then we'll use the bottom one, so 4 in Selesnya 2 times, and then we'll do that way. And then we'll make tokens for each one. We'll put a copy of each token into play. So that's a lot of tokens, and then we're just going to go out of our way to swing wide. The Sandworm Convergence also helps here, because we get to make copies of those worms as well. Next is the Destiny Spinner. For 1 and a green, you get a 2/3 enchantment creature human. This one's from the new set. Creatures and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. So that's important because we got a lot of creatures and we have a lot of enchantments. So this helps us just a little bit. We don't have many ways to counter things. Well, we don't have any ways to counter things in this. This is budget. So that's the thing. But also, for 3 and a green, target land you control becomes an XX elemental creature with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. It's still a land. So, how this works is for the 3 and the green, well, it's basically pretty understandable. It's telling you what it's doing. But regardless, if we have a whole bunch of enchantments out on the battlefield, since all of our enchantments are ones that want to stay out, we'll be able to make a giant trampler and then probably in the game. So that's another way we want to do that. Unfortunately, it's not considered a token creature, so we can't make copies of it using Reese the Redeemed, but it still has trample and haste, so we'll be able to put a land out, use the 4, and then use that same land that we had, and it has haste, so we'll be able to swing. And then also, since it'll be huge, it'll be okay. Then also, what you could do is use this ability and then use Mikaeus' ability. So now that land has a +1/+1 counter that won't go away. And then if you make that same land one again and use Mikaeus' ability again, it gets +2/+2 counter. And those counters don't go away even when it does become a land. So that just helps us out a little bit. Watley's Raptor for a green and a white. You get a 2/3 creature dinosaur. It's vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, proliferate, and then proliferate says choose any number of permanents and or players, then give them each another counter of each kind they already have. So how this works is basically Mikaeus has a +1/+1 counter on it. The land that we mentioned earlier with Destiny Spinner has a +1/+1 counter on it. Once Watley's Raptor enters the battlefield, we put another +1/+1 counter on each of those. So, yeah, that definitely works out. Elysian Carithid? I don't know how to say that word. But for 1 and a green, you get a 1/1 creature plant. It says tap, add 1 mana of any color. If you control a creature with 4 power or greater, add 2 mana of any color. Since we're going to keep putting +1/+1 counters on each of our creatures, eventually we'll get to the point where we have a creature with 4 power. So eventually this will make 2 mana. And then maybe, depending on how many we get, it'll be a 4/4 on its own. And so then it'll be able to make the 2 mana without any other card being out. Abzan Falconer is next. It's for 2 and white. It's a 2/3 with creature human with Outlast. And then for white, you tap it, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, Outlast only as a sorcery. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has flying. So now Shalai already has flying, but Mikaeus will have flying because of that. And then as we use Mikaeus' ability, now each of our creatures will also get +1/+1 counters on them, and so then they'll all be able to fly. So, and then that'll get pretty annoying if Sandworm Convergence is out, our opponents can't fly at us, and then we'll be able to swing everything with flying. So yeah, that helps out a lot. Now, unfortunately, the spell Hurricane will mess us up. And it has messed us up. I've tested this twice. So if you run into another green deck, maybe save Abzan Falconer for after you've seen Hurricane pop out, if you expect it. But if you don't play this out, give everything +1/+1 counters on him, give him fly. Dauntless Escort is next. For white, 1 green white, you get a 3/3 creature Rhino Soldier. Sacrifice it, and creatures you control are indestructible this turn. So now, in case you do run into an opponent that has Hurricane, you can sacrifice it, and now all the creatures have indestructible. Now, what's great about this is we can do this at any time. So if there's an effect that says we destroy on our opponent's turn, we sacrifice it at instant speed, all our creatures are indestructible, so one-sided board wipes. Yeah, it works for me. Next off is Evolution Sage. For 2 and a green, you get a 3/2 creature Elf Druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. We've already talked about proliferate. So we got 36 lands in this deck. At the point Evolution Sage comes out, we'll only have 33 to play. So, but Shalai is a 4-drop. And then Reese the Redeemer, Machias can be a 2-drop. So basically what we'll want to do is we'll want to wait until we can get this and one of those other things out, and then start playing all of our lands as fast as possible, and then proliferate, give all our creatures +1/+1 counters. So yeah, we're doing that thing. Good Fortune Unicorn. This is another card that goes great with Shalai. For 1 a green and a white, it's a 2/2 creature unicorn. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. So now Machias we can play for 1 mana, and it'll have a +1/+1 counter when it enters, and so we're not as worried about that anymore. Also, this just gives us another one. So the Abzan Falconer, when it enters the battlefield, if Good Fortune Unicorn is out, then it gets the +1/+1 counter on it. It immediately gains flying. So the only thing that kind of stinks is Good Fortune Unicorn does not get that, but we can give it +1/+1 counter many ways. So Mentor of the Meek. For 2 and a white, you get a 2/2 creature human soldier. When another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 1. If you do, draw a card. So Reese the Redeemed is in here because it goes with Mentor of the Meek. As we make those 1/1 tokens, or as we make copies of those tokens, they're all 1/1s. Well, all the ones that Reese the Redeemed can make. And so then we pay 1, we draw a card. Mentor of the Meek is one of the best ways to draw cards in white, and it's also extremely cheap. So if you have the ability to play this card, then I would definitely use it, especially in white weenie type effects. But Angel of Jubilation is next. For 1, a white, and a white, and you get a 3/3 creature angel with flying. Other non-black creatures you control get +1/+1, so that's everything since this is a non-black deck. And then players can't pay life or sacrifice creatures to cast spells or activate abilities. So this non-bows with Dauntless Escort because we're not able to sacrifice it to activate its ability. So, but this also keeps our opponent from being able to sacrifice cards to any of the altars to make mana. So yeah, I like this a lot. So the more expensive decks that we go against won't be able to really do anything as long as Angel of Jubilation is out. And then since we already bought this in the white deck, we already had it, so this helps us out a lot. Bloom Hulk is next. For 3 and a green. It's a 4/4 creature plant elemental. When it enters the battlefield, proliferate. That's all it's here for. That's all we care about. Emeria Angel. For 2 a white and a white, you get a 3/3 creature angel with flying. It has landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So now we're swarming the board with birds. Since green can go search our library for lands, we can go do that in each turn. We could be able to make 2 or 3 birds, just depends on how many ramp spells we're able to get into, but regardless, it doesn't really matter. The only thing we care about is putting lands onto the battlefield so that we can make the 1/1 birds. Malwu Loyal Companion. For 3 and a green, you get a 3/3 legendary creature hound with trample and vigilance. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters we put on Malwu, make that many +1 instead. So if Shalai goes to put a +1/+1 counter on each of our creatures, Malwu will see that and put another +1/+1 counter on itself. The same thing with if Machias gives it a +1/+1 counter. Same thing if Good Fortune Unicorn is out when it enters, it gets the +1, it sees that +1/+1, and then it gives itself another one. So yeah, Malwu can get big really fast, then it has trample and vigilance, so we'll be able to swing it every turn, trample over our opponents. Okami Ranger. This is Selesnya ×4 for a 2/2 creature elf knight, but also you can pay Selesnya ×4 for a sorcery adventure. It says create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens, and then its ability is tap creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. So these are not counters, it's just +1/+1, but say Mawu is out, it gets blocked by something that's just big enough to kill it. Tap Okami Ranger, give it a +1/+1 until end of turn. Now, Mawu doesn't die. And that's the same thing for all of our creatures, since that is probably one of the most important things we need. This deck is creature and enchantment focused, so yeah, Okami Ranger is definitely a must include in almost every Selesnya deck, as most of them are going to go with the overrun strategy. Retina called to the hunt for 2, a green and a green. You get a *3 legendary enchantment creature demigod. Its power is equal to your devotion to green. Now our devotion to green can be pretty big, seeing as we have 2-pip creatures and enchantments. So, and then each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. So like we did in the Spike Tribal green deck, we want this out as soon as possible, along with the Good Fortune Unicorn. Each of our creatures enter with +1/+1 counters on them. So, and then this also does not, this does, include tokens. So as the tokens enter, they also get +1/+1s. Also, Good Fortune Unicorn, because I didn't mention that, it also can have tokens enter with that. So, just in case you didn't know that. Herald of War for 3, a white and a white. You get a 3/3 creature angel with flying. Whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Angel spells and human spells you cast cost 1 less for each +1/+1 counter on Herald of War. So now Shalai is an angel, in case you hadn't realized that, and Mikaeus is a human. Those two are the most important when it comes to that card. So Herald of War, we can give it +1/+1 counters with multiple ways. So basically, what we want is Renata out, and we also want the Good Fortune Unicorn out. So when it enters, it gets +2/+2 immediately. So now, all of our angel and humans cost 2 less to cast. So now Shalai only cost 1 and a white, and then Mikaeus only costs white, and it comes in with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So the way you'd want to do this, preferably, is play Mikaeus first, so it gets those +1/+1 counters on it. The next turn, you attack with the Herald of War. You give it a +1/+1 counter with Mikaeus, so now it gains another 2 +1/+1 counters. So now Shalai only costs white. Also, the Emeria Angel and the Emeria Shepherd are in this deck, so it definitely helps us out a lot. And then Platinum Angel's also in it too, and we can cast that for free if we have 7 +1/+1 counters on Herald of War. Don't expect that, because Herald of War almost always dies pretty quick. So basically use this when you have extra mana and put +1/+1 counters on it, and then cast the things you need in the same turn, because opponents don't like seeing it. Juniper Order Ranger for 3, a green and a white. You get a 2/4 creature human knight. When another creature comes into play under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and a +1/+1 counter on Jupiter Order Ranger. So yeah, this is a human, so Herald of War will also reduce the cost in this, preferably making it so we can cast it for green and white. Yeah. Herald of War is also the first time I've run into this card, so if you run Angel Tribal, it's only 0.02 ticks, so that's definitely a must-have. But basically, this is another version of the Good Fortune Unicorn. As things enter the battlefield, then we're able to put +1/+1 counters on them. And then Juniper Order Ranger will get bigger as a result of that. So yeah, as things enter, put +1/+1 counters on it. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have trample, but it'll definitely get your chump blockers out of the way. So yeah, that's how we want to do that. Keeper of Fables is next. For 3, a green and a green, you get a 4/4 creature cat. When one or more non-human creatures you control deal combat damage, draw a card. Now, remember that this is not a May. You have to draw a card. So just be a little careful when you play Keeper of Fables. Preferably, you want to swing with this every time, because you want your opponent to be able to kill it, because it has to get out of the way. But basically, you have humans in this deck, so in case you start running low on the cards, just swing with the humans. Majestic Myarch, however you say that. For 4 and a green, you get a Star Store creature Chimera. Its power and toughness are equal to twice the number of creatures you control. We have a whole bunch of creatures, so. And then at the beginning of each combat, if you control a creature with flying, it gains flying. The same is true for First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, haste, hexproof, indestructible, lifelink, menace, reach, trample, vigilance. So we have cards with trample and vigilance and flying. So it's going to be able to fly pretty much as soon as possible. All of our creatures are going to have hexproof except for Shalai, so that's also a thing. Vigilance is on the Watley's Raptor. That's pretty much it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There aren't many keywords. Flying, vigilance, trample. Oh, Mawu has trample. Didn't think about that. Yeah, so flying, vigilance, and trample are the things it can get. And then maybe haste. I think there's ways to give haste, but whatever. So yeah, double its power and toughness are double the number of creatures you control, and then also we can give it +1/+1 counters on it and make that even stronger. So, Reverent Hoplite for 4 and a white. You get a 1/2 creature human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, create a number of 1/1 white human soldiers equal to the devotion of white. So white isn't as prevalent as green in this deck, but once it enters, we make a couple 1/1 tokens, then tap Machias, make them 2/2s. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely how that works. And then it's really important that if this dies, we're able to bring it back using one of our different ways to do so. So basically what ends up happening is this deck becomes a recursion deck, because Amaria Shepherd and then Amaria the Sky Ruin are both going to be able to bring cards from our graveyard and either put them back into our hand or onto the battlefield. So we want to save that for Reverent Hoplite. So yeah, that's that's what we want to do. Amaria Shepherd, since we mentioned it, it's the next on the list anyway. For 5 white and a white, you get a 4/4 creature angel with flying. It has landfall. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If that land is a plains, you may return that non-land permanent card to the battlefield instead. So yeah, the way we want to do this is Amaria Shepherd enters. We play a land after it's entered, and then we grab something else from it. Now, Herald of War is another important one that needs to stay on the battlefield, as well as anything that can give us +1/+1 counters. Amaria Shepherd will also want to keep Sandworm Convergence on the battlefield, and Wilderness Reclamation would also be a good one. But basically, Reverent Hoplite and the Sandworm Convergence are the two targets that you're going to keep going for every time. And then when those aren't in the graveyard, then you'll basically either A, not play the land, and then wait till the next turn, wait for something to die, and then do that, or B, just wait. Because it's non-land permanent card, you cannot grab Amaria the Sky Ruin if it goes, but regardless. Platinum Angel's next for 7, it's a 4/4 artifact creature, angel, it has flying, and you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. So you can go to 0 and you can't lose, and then your opponents can't win. So basically you use this stall out the game, but if you use this, your opponents will try to kill it. So Amaria Shepherd and Amaria the Sky Ruin will also be able to go grab those every turn. So Platinum Angel is also another important recurral piece. Blazing Archon is the last creature for 6 a white, and a white. You get a 5/6 creature Archon with flying, and creatures can attack you. So, we're making an army of tokens, we're making an army of creatures, and then creatures can't attack us. So, yeah. So, when you get to the 1v1, Blazing Archon is going to be the one you want to keep recurring. So that way your opponent's creatures can attack you, you attack your opponent each turn. And then since Shalai gives everything hexproof, they can't actually target the Archon. So yeah, that's how we want to do this. We have one Planeswalker, Jin Yangu, Wildcrafter for 2 and a green. You get a 3 loyalty legendary Planeswalker. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has tap, add 1 mana of any color, and then -1, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Now, we don't really have many ways to proliferate, so you don't want to use that -1. You just want to have this on the battlefield, give all our creatures +1/+1. Once all our creatures have +1/+1 on their own, then we can use them as ramp. And then Reese, the Redeemed, as it makes its tokens, as it copies tokens, then we have even more mana. So you want to save Reese the Redeemed's 1/1 elf tokens as ramp. And then you'll be able to get out the big things like Sandworm Convergence even easier. So we have 13 spells. First off is Rampant Growth for 1 and a green. Search your library for a basic land card, put that on the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library, go for this early game, grab a green, grab a forest with it. Forests are important. We want to get all the forests out of our deck first before we start going for plains. Basically, because we want to save those for late game with a Merry Shepherd and a Merry Sky Ruin. Now, Sky Ruin wants 7 on the battlefield to be able to do that, so once we get to 7, we want to hold off. We only have 10 planes. So, yeah. Sundering Growth is next for Selesnya Hybrid twice. It's an instant. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, then proliferate. So, Yin Yang Gu comes out. We're able to play this. Proliferate it. Help it not die. Collective Effort for 1, a white and a white. You get a sorcery that has Escalate. Tap an untapped creature you control. We have a whole bunch of them. So, first, destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Then, destroy target enchantment. And then last, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. Now, we're going to tap 2 creatures, so that way we can choose the other 2 modes. Destroying a creature with power 4 or greater is important, because we need as much removal as possible in Commander. Destroying a target enchantment, we target another player. We don't want to hinder the same player. And then we put the +1/+1 counters on us. So we helped ourselves, we hindered 2 opponents, so 1 player's neutral, 2 players lost 1, we gained 1. So while we lost a card that goes into our graveyard, we are neutral as well. So this is a really good card. Again, play that only when you have 2 creatures on the battlefield. Generous Gift for 2 and a white, instant, destroy target permanent, its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. Save this for against black decks, save this for things that make extra mana. Against green decks, destroy lands that have enchantments on them, so on and so forth. It's just, yeah, that's basically what we want to do. 2 and a green, sorcery, search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So we've got 25 basic lands in this deck. If we can make 25 creatures, and then have Yin Yang Gu make it so that they can tap for land, or tap for mana, excuse me. Then you tap all your creatures out, play Harvest Season, grab all your basic lands out of the deck. Having a Merry Shepherd after a board wipe would be important, as then you keep putting things out. A Merry Shepherd will let you put things in your hand for each forest or any other card, and for each plane you get to put things back on the battlefield. So, Kadama's Reach, 2 and a green, sorcery, arcane. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards, put 1 onto the battlefield tapped, the other into your hand, then shuffle your library. So, again, grab forest as quick as possible, because forests are going to be our mana ramp, and then then you'll want to do other things. So, yeah. Grab plains if you have a Merry Shepherd and a Merry the Sky Ruin out, and you haven't played a land yet, or grab another forest, have that for the next play. Pledge of Unity for 1, a green and a white, instant, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. You gain 1 life for each creature you control. So wait until you have a whole bunch of creatures, because we can keep doing this over and over again. Make tokens with Reese the Redeemed, give +1/+1 counters using Micaias. Renata makes things cheaper. So yeah, we just keep doing this over and over again. If you have a Kami Ranger in the graveyard, use a Merry Shepherd to put it in your hand, cast it to make the 2 1/1s. So keep making as many tokens as possible, Use Pledge of Unity, put the +1/+1 counter on each one of them, and gain life for it. So, Circuitous Route for 3 and a green, sorcery, search your library for up to 2 basic lands and or gate cards, put them on the battlefield tapped. If you haven't grabbed Selesnya Guildgate, go get that first as one of them, and then go grab a forest, seeing as there are more forests that are needed. Crush Contraband for 3 and a white. It's an instant, choose 1 or both. Exile target artifact, exile target enchantment. Again, wait until you need to do both of those things, so that way you can hit both, hinder 2 players instead of 1. So yeah. Decree of Justice for XX2, white, which is a lot. It's a sorcery, put X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying onto the battlefield. It has cycling for 2 and a white, discard this card, draw a card. When you cycle it, pay X. If you do, put X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield. More than likely, we're going to cycle this almost every single time. So to be able to make 1 4/4 angel, we'd have to pay 2, 4, 6. 6 mana. And then as we go, we have to do 2 more mana for each angel. So 8 mana would be 2. 10 mana would be 3. So it's not really worth it, especially since we can put +1/+1 counters on it. Now, if we're able to tap all of our creatures for mana at that point, then you make as many angels as you can. But if you're just using lands for this, just cycle it, then you get to draw a card and make the X white soldier creature tokens, and then we have ways to make them bigger. So increasing devotion for 3 a white and a white. It's a sorcery. Put 5/1/1 human creature tokens on the battlefield. If it's cast from a graveyard, put 10 of those tokens on the battlefield instead. And then flashback is 7 a white and a white. That's how you cast it from your graveyard. So first off, pay 5, make 5 tokens. Then pay 9, make 10 tokens. So it's worth it. And then again, if you're going to do this, make sure you wait to tap Machias, or wait to make copies with Wreath to Redeem, seeing as you double that many counters. So yeah. Overwhelming Stampede for 3 a green and a green. It's a sorcery. To the end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X, where X is the greatest number, greatest power among creatures you control. Now, just normally, I'm pretty sure the biggest one is a 5/6. So at most, if you don't have any +1/+1 counters on anything, it'll get 5/5. So 5/5 on a whole bunch of tokens and trample. You're going to kill your opponent. And then that's basically the point. Now, if you can, again, do this after Machias has been tapped to give everything +1/+1, or you've used as many Shalai triggers as possible, because, again, we can tap all of our creatures for mana. So we're just going to keep at our opponent's end step, tap all of our creatures, give them each +1/+1 counter, untap them, then tap Machias, then again, keep doing this over and over again until all of our creatures are big, our opponents are scared of them, and then, boom, overwhelming Stampede. That's how we'll finish the game most of the time. If we can't, it'll help us kill at least 2 players. At least 2. That's the point. Rishkar Expertise is next for 4 green and green. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Again, that can be a lot. And then you may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. So we draw the card first, and then we play it. And then there are a whole bunch of cards we'd be able to play for free. So, preferably, you'd get something like Herald of War out of that. But, because you want to take advantage of that and play the biggest thing you can out of your hand. So, and then it doesn't matter what the card is, as long as the converted mana cost is 5 or less. Next off, we have 10 artifacts. First off is Altar of the Brood. You knew it was in here, so... and as always, we go over it anyway. For 1 mana, you get an artifact. Whenever another permanent enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent puts the top card of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So with Wreath Redeemed, we're going to mill our opponent out. Because we're going to keep making copies of all our tokens over and over and over again, and then that gets real annoying. So we might be able to mill 1 or 2 players out. It depends on how fast we can get Alter the Brood. Because green and white don't have ways to search out artifacts, it makes it just a little bit more difficult to be able to grab it. But anyway. Mask of Avacyn is next. For 2, it's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+2 and has hexproof. And then it's equipped as 3. So since Shalai gives everything hexproof except for itself, move Mask of Avacyn to Shalai, and then boom. Now it's made it so that Shalai has hexproof, so everything has hexproof. Well, all our creatures and planeswalkers and us have hexproof. It does not count for our enchantments. And then that was the reason for one of these cards, for Destiny Spinner, since it makes it so enchantments can't be countered. Mirror Shield is next for 2. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +0/+2 and has hexproof, and whenever a creature with death touch blocks or becomes blocked by this creature, destroy that creature. So this is before damage is dealt. If it's assigned as a blocker, the death touch creature dies. So again, put this on Shalai, make it so that she gets big as possible, and then, well, she doesn't have vigilance, so it really doesn't matter, but you get to block every turn. If it has death touch, the death touch creature dies. Heraldic Banner's next for 3. It's an artifact. As it enters the battlefield, choose a color. Creatures you control of the chosen color get +1/+0. There are basically only white creatures that are going to be that are going to be the ones to worry about. Like Reese the Redeemed makes white and green elf tokens. And then there's something else. Amaria Angel makes 1/1 white bird creatures. So the way this is looking is that we're just going to we're going to choose white for Heraldic Banner. The Reverent Hoplite makes 1/1 white human soldiers. So yeah, basically everything that makes tokens is going to make white tokens. And then also the Akami Ranger makes white tokens. So since everything makes mostly white tokens, we're going to choose white. But let's go over the rest of the card. Creature of the chosen color get +1/+0, and then tap, add 1 mana of the chosen color. So since we chose white, all of our white creatures are going to get +1/+0, and then we can add white to our mana pool. Not a bad card. Mana Geode is next for 3. When it enters the battlefield, scry 1, and then tap, add 1 mana of any color, so we can tap for either green or white. Selesnya Locket taps for either of our colors. It's also a 3-drop. And then for Selesnya 4 times, tap, sacrifice it, draw 2 cards. So if you have a whole bunch of mana, play this out, then sack it to draw 2 more cards. Spinning Wheel for 3, it's an artifact, tap, add 1 mana of any color. And then for 5, tap target creature. So if you got something that our creatures can't deal with yet, we'll just tap it. We got lots of land, lots of ways to make land, so just tap it. Wildspeaker Cloak, Whisper Soak Cloak, Wildspeaker Cloak, I don't know what I'm talking about. For 3, artifact equipment. Equipped creature is unblockable. Equipped creature has Shroud, meaning it can't be the target of spells or abilities. And then equip 2, so pay 2, attach it to target creature. So you're going to use this on Mawu, because Mawu has trample, and we don't, well, that actually wouldn't make sense now that I think about it. Shalai would be perfect for this, seeing as there aren't any abilities that we're going to want to target it with. If we have Whisper Soak Cloak out, then we don't need the Mask of Avacyn. So another perfect one for this to go on would be Mikaeus. Seeing as we're not targeting Mikaeus with anything, we can just put a +1/+1 counter on it, and remove +1/+1 counter on it, so on and so forth. Generals, Kabuto for 4. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature can't be the target of spells or abilities, so it has Shroud. And then prevent all combat damage that will be dealt to equipped creature, equip 2. Again, Shalai is going to want this. Mikaeus is going to want this. Reese the Redeemed is going to want this. So we have 1 equipment for each one of those 3, and then everything else gets protected as we go. You can also use this for Amaria Shepherd as well, seeing as we don't want it to die or be targeted by something. So, yeah. Gilded Lotus is last for 5, add 3 mana of any color. If you get this card with Rishkar's Expertise, play it, because 5 mana for free, play that, then you get 3 mana additional, so you only spent 2 for, you only spent 3 for Rishkar's Expertise. Ajani's, Oath of Ajani, for green and a white. When enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Planeswalker spells you control cost 1 less to cast. If we lose Oath of Ajani, we go get it back with Amaria Shepherd. It gets +1/+1 counter on each of our creatures again, so we just keep doing that over and over again. Then Yin Yang Gu is going to be 1 less to cast. If Oath of Ajani is out, probably will be, who knows. Sylvan Library is next for 1 and a green. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your draw step, you may draw 2 additional cards. If you do cards, pay 4 life, or put the card back on top of your library. So we can choose any of the 3 cards that we drew. There aren't many ways to gain life with this deck, so you really don't want to abuse losing life with this. You just want to look at those top 3 cards and grab either Mikaeus or Reese the Redeemed if you have it. If you don't, grab a land, whatever. Banishing Light for 2 and a white is an enchantment. When Banishing Light enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Banishing Light leaves the battlefield. So, yeah, there's a Nicobolus in the way, banish it. There's a god that you can't get rid of, Banishing Light it. So, yeah, that's how we want to do that. Hydra's Growth is next for 2 and a green. It's an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on the enchanted creature. This is going on Mawu. Because Mawu is going to see that and put an additional +1/+1 counter on it. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of +1/+1 counters on enchanted creature. So, the only thing about that is Mawu will see those doubled counters and only put 1 additional. So, if it did double, that'd be awesome, because then you'd quadruple all the counters on Mawu each turn. But Mawu is going to get big on its own. Hydra's Growth is just going to make that bigger, and then it also has Trample. So, yeah. Omen of the Hunt for 2 and a green. It's an enchantment with flash, meaning you can play it at instant speed. When Omen of the Hunt enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. And then for 2 and a green, sacrifice Omen of the Hunt, scry 2. We're never going to scry 2. Well, I can't say never. We'll scry 2 if it's really important, but preferably we want it on the battlefield for the Green Devotion. Because of the Green Devotion, Renata will get will get 1 additional toughness power. So it would be a 3/3 instead of a 2/3 when it enters the battlefield. Conclave Tribunal for 3 and a white. It's an enchantment that has Convoke. Convoke says you may tap creatures while you cast it, and then that tapped creature pays for 1 colorless or 1 mana of that creature's color. Since we have white and green tokens and white tokens, we can tap those and then pay for the white. So, and then when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Conclave Tribunal leaves the battlefield. What's important about this is Convoke can tap cards that have just entered the battlefield. So, you made a whole bunch of creatures with Reese the Redeemed. You can tap 4 of them. Conclave Tribunal's free. Growing Ranks for 2 and Selesnya 2 times. Enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, populate. So populate, we haven't gone over that one yet. Put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of a creature token you control. So since we have Sandworm Convergence, we're going to go for those. If we don't have a Sandworm from Sandworm Convergence, then one of Reese the Redeemed's tokens will be fine. Parallel Lives for 3 and a green. It's an enchantment. If an effect would put 1 or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. So we're looking at Reese the Redeemed here again. Once Reese the Redeemed makes a copy of any token we control, of every token we control, then Parallel Lives says make an additional token of every token we control. So if we have 10 tokens, Reese the Redeemed will try to make 10. Parallel Lives will see that and make an additional 10. So now we have 30 tokens out. So yeah, it gets out of hand real fast. Parallel Lives can come out early since it's only a 4-drop. And then, yeah, now we can't protect it because Shalai does not protect it. But yeah, that's that's basically what we're doing. And then our opponent can respond to it once we start to make tokens, but yeah. Path of Discovery for 3 and a green is an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it explores. Reveal the top card of your library. Put that card in your hand if it's land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on the creature. Then put the card back or put it into your graveyard. Path of Discovery, we got 36 lands, so a third of the time it's going to run into a land, and then we put it into our hand. Now, unfortunately, our hand's going to get big, so... But regardless, it doesn't really matter. The +1/+1 counter is what we want. Get as many +1/+1 counters on each of our creatures as possible. Since the land gets out of the way the next time we explore, then, well, you know, we get another +1/+1 counter on it. Since Reese Redeemed, Parallel Lives, you're going to make a whole bunch of tokens as we go. It's going to trigger Explore a lot, so watch your clock. If you don't explore fast enough, then your clock gets really small really fast, and you don't want that. Wilderness Reclamation is next for 3 and a green. It's an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, untap all your lands. So, we've used all of our lands to cast spells and do other things we needed to do. Then we untap them the end of our last opponent's end step. If we have enough mana, 6 isn't really hard. We either A, use Reese the Redeemed's ability to copy all our tokens, or B, use Shalai's ability to put a +1/+1 counter on each of our creatures, and then use Mikaeus' ability to put another one. So you can do either or. Preferably, the Shalai Mikaeus play is the one you want to go for, but Reese the Redeemed's play doesn't hurt because then you can use Shalai's ability again. Or you can use Reese the Redeemed's ability during your turn. The end step, you use Shalai's ability. So, Whichever way you do it, it doesn't really matter. Asceticism is next for 3, a green and a green. It's an enchantment. Creatures you control can't be the targets of spells or abilities your opponent control. And then for 1 and a green, regenerate target creature. Regenerate says if it would be destroyed, instead ignore it and then tap it. So let's say they target our Keeper of Fables, or a board wipe happens, and our Keeper of Fables could die. We can pay 1 and a green to regenerate it. If it's untapped, we tap it. The regenerate lasts for 1 destroy effect, so if they play 1 board wipe, then play another board wipe, we would have to regenerate the creature twice. But we can make a whole bunch of mana, and we have a whole bunch of creatures. So, basically, what'll end up happening is every turn we'll make a whole bunch of tokens, then we'll use those tokens when we're able for mana, so that way we can keep as many creatures as we can. Mirai's Wake for 3, a green and a white. It's an enchantment. Creatures you control get +1/+1. This is all creatures, so that's important for the tokens. But remember, if you have Mirai's Wake and Angel of Jubilation, since both of these give our creatures +1/+1, if you make a 1/1 token with Reese the Redeemed, it will not trigger Mentor of the Meek because it says power 2 or less. So it non-bows with Mentor of the Meek, but once we get Mirai's Wake out, we probably don't need Mentor of the Meek to be drawing cards anyway. But also Mirai's Wake says, when you tap a land for mana, add 1 mana to your mana pool of any type that land can be produced. So what's important about that is the Guild Gate can produce green or white, so we'll be able to tap it for green and white. That's the only card that can do that, I think. So Collective Blessings is next. Again, this card non-bows with Mentor of the Meek, but again, after you've gotten to this point, you probably don't need Mentor of the Meek anyway. For 3, a green and a white, it's an enchantment. Creatures you control get +3/+3. True Conviction for 3, a white, and a white. It's an enchantment. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. So, yeah, we're putting a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters on each of our creatures, and then they get double strike and lifelink. So they're going to hurt. And we're going to try to hurt our opponents as fast as possible. Again, Yin Yang Gu makes it so that all of our tokens that have +1/+1 counter, well, all of our creatures with +1/+1 counters are then able to tap for mana. So make as many as we can, tap them for mana. Creatures you control have double strike and lifelink. So that's how we're going to do that. Sandworm Convergence is the last enchantment for 6, a green and a green. It's an enchantment, as I said, as the last enchantment, but creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. At the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 green worm creature token. Sandworm Convergence is an 8 mana spell, but it is definitely needed in pretty much every green deck that can run it. Now, a whole bunch of people are going to say, but it's not lean enough. But we got ways to make lots of tokens, lots of mana. We don't really care about being lean in this deck. If we draw something that helps us ramp, then that helps us out faster. Sandworm Convergence needs to come out as soon as possible. Because, 1, we don't want things flying creatures attacking us or planeswalkers, and then that makes it easier for our land-based attackers to be able to kill our opponents. Boom. 36 lands. First one's Blighted Woodland. First, it has tap, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool, and then for 3 and a green, tap, sacrifice it, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tab, then shuffle your library. Emeria of the Sky Ruin says, it enters battlefield tapped. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 7 or more planes, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Tap, add 1 green to your mana pool. 1 white to your mana pool. Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse both say tap, sacrifice this card, search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. You're going to hold these until you have a Emeria Shepherd, seeing as Emeria Shepherd cares about when those lands in the battlefield. And this is also the same for Emeria Angel too, so wait until you have those out and then crack them, so that way you get additional land drops. Field of Ruin, for first you can tap it, add colorless, or pay 2, tap, sacrifice Field of Ruin, restore target non-basic land and opponent controls. Each player searches their library for a basic card, put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So what stinks about this is you're neutral when this happens, and then your opponent that you destroy their land, they're neutral. But the 2 that you didn't destroy their lands, they're positive ones since they gain a basic land for no reason. So 15 Forests, you know what they do. Kalani Garden, It enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, make a 0/1 plant creature token, and then taps for green mana. The reason I wanted this is because it gives the 0/1 creature token, plant token. It does not have defender, so once we start putting +1/+1 counters on it, and we can make copies of it with Recently Redeemed, we just get giant plants. So yeah, that's how I want to do that. Mirrodin's Core is next. Tap, add 1 colorless to your mana pool, or tap, put a charge counter on Mirrodin's Core, and then tap, remove a charge counter from Mirrodin's Core, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So this is going to store up charge counters, but also we have ways to proliferate. So if we proliferate, we make sure Mirrodin's Core has 1 charge counter on it, proliferate that 1 charge counter, and now every turn we have a way to make mana. There are 10 planes. Again, you know what they do. Salt Crusted Steppe for tap, add 1 to your mana pool, or pay 1 and tap, add a storage counter to Salt Crusted Steppe. Or 1, remove X storage counters from them, add X mana in any color, any combination of green and or white to your mana pool. So each turn we're going to pay 1 and tap it. Also, if we have Wilderness Reclamation, pretty sure that's the one. Yep. If we have Wilderness Reclamation, we'll untap it every turn, at the end of our end step. So at the end of our opponent's end step, we'll tap it, add storage counters, and we'll just keep doing that over and over again until we get to the point where we have enough to cast a giant spell. Or if an opponent tries to destroy it, then we can pay the 1, tap it, remove all the storage counters on it, and then play something afterwards. Selesnya Guildgate, you know what it does. Enters the battlefield tapped, adds 1 of our 2 colors to our mana pool. Selesnya Sanctuary enters the battlefield. When it enters, return a land you control to its owner's hand. Tap, add green-white to your mana pool. So, yeah. We're going to want to return Kalani Garden, so that way we can make another 0/1 plant creature token. That's why that's in here. But also, adding 2 mana instead is pretty awesome. Mirari's Wake will make it so it makes 3 mana. And then Wilderness Reclamation untaps it every turn. So, Terramorphic Expanse already went over. And then V2 Ghazi, the city tree. Tap, add 1 to your mana pool, or 2 green, white, tap, put a 1/1 green sapperling creature token into play. So, you want to do that if Recently Redeemed isn't out, or if you want to make more tokens. You use that, though, and you lose 4 mana, well, 5 mana, seeing as you can't make the mana from V2 Ghazi. But also, Recently Redeemed's ability only costs 3, and you don't lose a land for it, so it's however you want to do it. If you want to make multiple tokens each turn, then V2 Ghazi is a good card. And then also, again, if you don't have a way to make it, then you do that. Anyways, that is the whole 100. Like I said at the beginning of the video, $2.32 and pay online, or $163.82 in paper. If you like the podcast or video, depends. It uploads to YouTube sometimes. But anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Feel free to follow on Podbean, because you can find me on podbean.com/Altar of the Brood podcast. Also, again, YouTube, MTG Anonymous, Discord, MTG Anonymous, and also Patreon, MTG Anonymous. Anyway, thanks for listening.